Thanks everybody for joining today. My name's Hayden. I'm one of the owners here at Techneaux. Pretty excited to have our cybersecurity team share a story with you. It's pretty interesting. It's got a lot of fun facts. Um, Charles is the director of cybersecurity here. Drew's our leading security analyst. It's a pretty cool story. Should give you a lot of insight into um, an example of what could happen during a ransomware attack. So with that, I'll kick it over to Charles and he can share it with you.
Hello, everybody. Let's get things kicked off here. Imagine it's just another ordinary day until someone tells you that this screen has popped up on every computer inside of your organization. This is what a local business walked into one unfortunate day. 72 hours after this incident began, my team was contracted to do pretty much anything we could do to help. We walked in with 3 days left on the ransom timer, which is when the decryption key would be deleted, and that would be the only way for this organization to unlock their data. The ransom was upwards of $15,000 per computer. 2 weeks later, everything was stable and the customer was back in business. Let's begin. Here's a preview of what we'll be discussing during our scary story today. We'll have a Q&A section at the end. There is a Q&A button that you'll be able to submit questions to during the presentation. If you submit a question during the presentation, we'll address it at the end, or you can save your questions for the end. But this is the best way to do that. A little bit about me. Before we get started, I've been with Techneaux now for 7.5 years, and I currently hold the position of cybersecurity team lead. I've been in the industry for 15 years and currently specialize in risk management. My co-host today is Drew Boyd. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Drew.
Thanks, man. Hey guys, Drew Boyd. I'm really excited to be here talking to y'all. I've been in cybersecurity for somewhere in the vicinity of 10 years. I've really worked all over the map in that sector, but mostly I like to say most of my experience is organizational risk management and network vulnerability management. So that's me.
Awesome, thank you, Drew.
Yeah.
All right. And I looked and behold a pale horse, and he who sat upon him was named ransomware. What is ransomware anyways? Well, it's a type of malicious software designed to block access to a computer system until a sum of money is paid. I know that sounds fun and great, but it's really awful. Here's what I get from business owners who've never been through a ransomware event. If you get hit with ransomware, what are you going to do? You're going to pay the ransom and you're going to restore from backups. Or you're going to restore from backups, really. Well, they think maybe you're going to be down for a few days and then you're going to get back to business. It's just a long weekend with some, additional stress, but who isn't stressed out these days anyway? Well, no, as a matter of fact, it's so much worse than that. It's so much worse that it's actually hard for me to express to you the amount of stress and anxiety and pressure that I hear from these other business owners when they're going through this type of event. So please take this information seriously, as it could save you a lot of heartache. So let me give you a little intro to our story. This is an example of what could happen from an incident that a real life incident that happened from a couple years ago to an organization who helped. Luckily, someone from this organization had heard about Techneaux and was referred to us, and we were able to go in and do some good things. Imagine now that everything is lost. You don't know who owes you money or who you owe money to. You can't do payroll. Your business is basically toast. In this case, the backups for this organization were infected with ransomware in order to maximize the odds that they were going to pay the ransom. All their databases were locked. The ransom was not necessarily unreasonable for the company, but it did present a ton of issues. One was that this organization was looking at potentially paying fines and penalties to HIPAA, and then also the lost revenue from downtime and other such things were really painful to this organization. When we first went in, this is when we did our scoping and discovery, and we did some assessments. First thing was that we walked in at this company. This was 72 hours after it had already began. Their previous IT provider was on site, and you could tell that they were stressed and they were just doing what they thought was best. But what they were doing was unintentionally destroying evidence because they were wiping the machines, trying to just basically set things up again. But this was before forensics had a chance to perform their duty, or even cyber insurance was called into the situation. This company was lucky that they had cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is a must in today's risk profile. Think of cyber insurance like a reserve parachute. You wouldn't want to jump out of the plane with just one parachute. But insurance is honestly the last resort. It's not your primary solution. Really, defense in depth is the key to avoid this problem altogether. The insurance helps by providing a cyber attorney, forensics, a negotiator, a ransom payment. They can help you with restoration and business interruption costs, your reputational harm, and maybe do client notifications and credit monitoring if needed. Cyber insurance can't really solve all your problems. Fines and penalties, loss of customers less likely to do business with you, ongoing compliance costs, post-breach costs, your brand identity taking a hit. And of course, if you had multiple breaches, you'll ultimately not be insurable anymore. So insurance can't just be there all the time to solve these problems. In this case, they did have insurance, and an incident response team and a cyber attorney were activated, and this did help substantially in the recovery efforts. Here is the anonymous organization's cyber defense matrix. A cyber defense matrix helps us understand the security landscape of your environment and identifies security needs and considerations when building your organization's security portfolio. What's missing here that could have helped this organization? Well, there's multi-factor authentication, there's security awareness training, there's network segmentation, having the appropriate kind of backups that can survive a ransomware attack, doing dark web monitoring, and having an incident response plan is just a few of the controls that can help flesh out this cyber defense matrix to make it look a little bit better. And in the coming slides, we'll show you what that would look like. So we began recovering. There was forensics involved. We had direction from insurance, which was helpful. When we first went into this system or into this organization, we immediately asked, hey, do you guys have cyber insurance? We weren't going to really touch anything until we knew that answer. Cyber insurance has a set of rules, and in their policy, if you do something incorrect or something else, you might accidentally violate your policy and potentially not be able to get the help you need from your insurance. So, of course, that was our first question, and they didn't actually know if they had cyber insurance at first. They had to ask. They had to go and check their policy. Thank goodness they did purchase cyber insurance as part of one of their packages that they had, and this allowed them to enact that. One of the things that we did to get this organization started, just to kind of start the recovery efforts, was to create a clean and dirty network. So what we did was we preserved the entire network that was infected, all the workstations, all the servers, everything. We left it completely intact for forensics to do their job. We had done some forensics, but the insurance company has their own forensics team, and we let them do their thing to make sure that we could find exactly what holes this organization had. How did the ransomware start? Can we close those holes? Kick the hackers out, make sure that they're not able to continuously do damage once we get the clean network started. So once we were able to make those assessments and make those determinations, we filled those gaps and kind of shored up their security enough to be able to create a clean network. So we stood up an entire clean network, all new workstations, all new servers, everything completely from scratch on something that's totally separated from the infected systems, and began to rebuild their company. This allowed them to get back to business eventually. The aftermath. So in this case, 2 weeks later, we've successfully rebuilt the entire company from the ground up, essentially, which allowed the company to start doing business again. This was really good because before that they were actually working off of a pen and paper, basically. Doing they didn't have the staff to really be able to do this kind of manual entry before. The kind of volume of work that was coming in was largely automated before, but now that they're having to do it manually, it created a huge problem for them to be able to fill these orders in time. So once we got them back up and running, that wasn't the end. So we got them up and running again 2 weeks later, which is the average time that a company is down during a ransomware attack. So we were actually maybe short of it, maybe a day. So we got them up and running fairly quickly. And then once they were up and running, that still wasn't the end of it, right? So they still had all this data that was locked. This locked data contained, all their customer information, their payroll, everything. So getting that unlocked was key to this company being able to stay open after the fact. The FBI is never going to suggest that you pay the ransom, but they do realize that paying the ransom is often your only recourse. The FBI did get involved. We had worked with them to try and contact the threat actor. However, the threat actor became unresponsive. So the customer was actually very willing, the insurance was very willing to pay this ransom because, without it, this company was going to go under and they were going to lose a lot of money in the process. So what had happened was the threat actor was completely unresponsive, and ultimately, a couple weeks later, the FBI was able to contact a totally different hacker. So this was a different threat actor who had nothing to do with this organization getting ransomware, but there was a different organization who had gotten ransomware by a different hacker, but he was using the same type of ransomware. And so the FBI was able to then work with this other threat actor to obtain a decryption key, but they still had to pay a ransom for it. So they paid a totally different person a ransom in order to unlock most of their data. Of course, not all data was recoverable, but the key data was recovered and allowed this organization to remain in business to this day. Here we have a statement from this anonymous customer. So to summarize it, they were very gracious that we were able to come in, take care of business really quickly, and then ultimately it resulted in them being able to stay open. They say here, I can tell you without hesitation that Techneaux saved us from what could have been the end of our business. And really, we were key to this operation. So that pretty much summarizes our story. Up until now, the customer is back up and running again. They're happy. They know that this problem, was it was pretty dire. It didn't look like they were going to be able to come back from this, but they were able to. I'm going to hand things over to Drew, my co-host here, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what a fully fleshed out cyber defense matrix looks like.
Okay, so you hear a story like that, and you're thinking, well, man, that really sucks. I don't want that to happen to me. So, yeah, like absolutely. If you think back to that previous defense matrix that we saw earlier on in this presentation, it didn't look at all like the one you're seeing now. It was pretty bare. There were a lot of blanks. Any one of those blanks could have been the in that the attackers used to compromise the system. So, okay, we're going to pivot this whole presentation to, all right, let's talk about what could prevent a ransomware incident or any kind of cyber incident. Ransomware is one of the terrible ones that could happen. All right, so the defense matrix you see in front of you is representative of, we'll say, a more hardened organization, an organization that took the time to fill all the gaps, right? What you see here, most of the categories have at least one control in place, but a lot of them have multiple controls in place. This is a great visualization of what we call defense in depth. You don't want any one control to be a single point of failure. Attackers are, really good at figuring ways around control. So you, in a defense matrix like this, will have augmenting controls that'll step in. We're one of your security controls to fail or to be compromised. So, okay. So going from that defense matrix, we're going to talk a little bit about specific tips and prevention. That matrix there was a whole lot on there. There was a whole lot going on, and you look at that and you're like, man, that probably costs a lot of money. So you don't eat the elephant all at once. You take it one bite at a time. The first thing you have to do when entertaining the idea for organizational risk management, a security plan, is to really spell the plan out. This is going to be totally different for every business. A plan that works for our business is not going to be the plan that works for your business. You're going to map this out. You're going to sit down with representatives from your business divisions and make sure you have unity on what the plan's going to look like. The first part of the plan should be a security assessment. So that security assessment is really good at giving you high level, where are you at now? What does your defense matrix even look like now? And it tells you what gaps you need to fill come the point that you're trying to get to. So rollout for a plan like this, maybe it'll take a week. It might take months. You just have no idea. So the security assessment is going to give you a good bird's eye view of how long this is even going to take. Oftentimes you couple a security assessment with a penetration test. That's a really good way of simulating an attack against your organization and pointing out holes and points of compromise. The penetration test is going to do everything and stop at actually compromising your data, and then it's going to give you a report back on how far it was able to get. Okay, so that security assessment is going to give you an idea of how to structure what we call implementation groups. Again, you don't eat this thing all at once, you take bites. Implementation groups are a good way of taking these security controls and grouping them in logical, sensible implementation groups. That tells you in what order you're going to roll them out. The implementation group map is going to drive your security plan rollout roadmap. That's going to actually put tasks like actionable items in your plan where you're going to roll these implementation groups out. You absolutely want to make sure this plan aligns with your organizational budget and any other strategic plans that your organization is going through. This is going to be really invasive. This is going to be a huge undertaking. So you're going to map it out against your whole organization, what you've got going on to make sure that you have high chance of success, high chance of actually finishing. The last step, after you've made sure the plan aligns with your strategic goals and your budget, is in the plan, you want to make sure you earmark points for your security team to stay up to date on vulnerabilities. So what this is saying is the plan doesn't end once you finalize the plan, close the book, and move on to something else. What you're going to do is schedule reoccurring items to stay on top of vulnerabilities. An organization that's fully secured today may wake up tomorrow and find lots of new vulnerabilities in their environment. So implementation groups are really cool. This isn't a techno term. There's an organization called CIS that say coined these terms and gave us the framework that we use, and it's a really good one. So this is what the implementation groups look like. In implementation group 1, there are 56 total controls. Doesn't mean you're going to use and deploy all 56. You're going to do what makes sense for your organization. But these are going to be your most basic controls. They're going to protect against non-targeted attacks. So these are, I said basic controls. They're also the simplest to implement and deploy. Next up, you've got implementation group 2. There are a lot more controls in this one, but these get a little more advanced. They're a little more purpose-built, and they start focusing on the differing levels of information security, information sensitivity. After your organization rolls out that second implementation group, it'll start looking at the third implementation group. These are by far the most complex, the most time-consuming to roll out. Yeah, these start really focusing on some really complex attack types. So what this looks like for your organization is you're going to work with a cyber team that understands a model like this and understands your business and its goals, how it makes money, how it functions, and is going to work with you, your business units, to structure the implementation groups and controls that make sense for your business and a rollout plan that makes sense for your business. So at the end of this, cybersecurity is a journey. It's not a destination. There's always going to be new challenges on the horizon. What this really embodies is kind of that last point in the tips and prevention that we talked about. It doesn't stop because you rolled out some shiny new controls. Attackers don't give up and turn away when they see that you've got a cool EDR solution in place. They're really good. They're really innovative at looking at your controls and figuring out a way around them. So tomorrow there's going to be new vulnerabilities that we as cyber professionals have to be aware of how they apply to your organization. And we have to know your organization intimately to know how to protect it against those vulnerabilities. And so that's really not gonna stop, is the sad thing about it. But like I said, you want to work with cybersecurity professionals that understand your business and understand security, and they're not just gonna high-five each other on their way to tacos after they roll out a security control. They're gonna put things in place that that continue monitoring your organization and that controls effectiveness. With that, I think we're gonna wrap it up and open up for questions. Again, if you guys didn't see or hear Charles mention it earlier, please comment any questions you'd like to ask. There's a Q&A section in Teams here. Just start hitting us up in there.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We'll give it a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions. You know, these threat actors who propagate this ransomware, you know, these hackers, they're also entrepreneurs too, just like you know, yourself possibly. They use the same business development, you know, technology improvement, you know, strategies that you might be using in your own business to improve yourself. They're using these exact same things. They're working like a business. It's basically become almost ransomware as a service at this point, with the way they operate and the way that they know what these insurance limits are and everything else. And they'll do what it takes to get a payment, and they're very good at that. You know, there's these things like double and triple extortions where they'll come after your customers, they'll come after your data, Whether or not you can recover is not even a question of whether or not you'll pay the ransom anymore. It's really, stopping it is really where the key is. You want to be preventative. You don't want it to happen and have to rely on insurance. Looks like we got a couple questions here. How did the company's backups get crypto locked is a question. So it's a good question. Having let's call it legacy backups, where basically your backups live on the exact same network as your other systems. It typically will use the same kind of authentication. So if you have admin access to the servers or workstations, let's say, it means that you probably also have access to these backups. So really the most resilient kind of backups are what they call immutable backups, where we have basically, we're encrypting your backups both on-site and off-site in separate environments. And these environments don't share any access to any other system. It's unique to just the backups. And then there's also a redundancy to the backups. So, just in the event that even, let's say, a fire were to occur, your backups on site might get destroyed, just physically even, and you still want to have something to recover from. So having those geo-redundant backups plus segregating them and encrypting them are really the key. In this case, this company just basically had a external drive hooked up to their servers and was taking a backup from the servers to this external drive. The external drives shared access with the servers, so as soon as the servers got compromised, they were just basically able to delete the backups and encrypt them, which is what they did. And that's what these guys will do, is they'll come in and sabotage your recovery efforts to really make it difficult to recover. And that's all basically to incentivize you to pay the ransom. We have another question here. What are some of the most common ways that companies get exposed to ransomware? And what are some of the high value, low complexity controls from implementation group one that companies tend to implement first? So right now, one of the biggest attack vectors is going to be email. Email is by far the largest attack vector that companies most often get compromised from. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 90% of breaches occur usually starting from an email. So really shoring up your email security is probably the best place to start. That, and also password protection. So you want to do two things, because in order for your backups to really, in order for your email to really be secure at all, let's just say from an access standpoint, you want to have good password policies. So you want to protect your email with a good password policy, with such things as like complex passwords and multi-factor authentication really stop most intrusions that way. But the most common way that they're really getting in is that they send you phishing emails. And really, it's the human element. They don't really want to send you a virus necessarily. They don't want to like just send things in through an email that are going to flag it. They just want to ask you a question, like, hey, Charles, or whoever it might be. Hey, I'm your IT provider. I need your password for something, or maybe they're just asking simple questions like, hey, maybe they're impersonating someone like, hey, I'm your vendor and you owe me some money. Click on this link, open up this attachment, wire some money to us. We have an invoice for you, and maybe it looks legitimate, and you're really following through with it. But really, you need to be able to have those phishing protections in place, and also have the security awareness to look for those red flags in those emails. So they do have really good phishing protection services out there. We offer a really good one, and that really stops the majority of it. But there's always going to be something that these guys are getting very clever with, the way they're bypassing these phishing protection services by just saying things that are not flagging the system. It's like really common questions or really simple things. So whenever they do get past the system or any kind of protection that way, you just have to have that security awareness in mind to say, okay, this is not normal. We've never been asked to get a gift card before. We've never, there's something wrong with this vendor's email. there's some typos, there's some other problem. So looking for those things are really the best thing. I'd say from implementation group 1, those are some of the best controls we can put in place just right away.
So I saw Jared asked, what's the best place to stay in touch with the latest cybersecurity vulnerabilities? There's lots of different people that'll host threat briefings or post vulnerabilities. Twitter's honestly a good place. You find some good cybersecurity guys to follow there, and they'll post vulnerabilities as soon as they see them. I've got a daily threat briefing I follow called Simply Cyber that I've been following them for a couple years now. I think it's CISO series podcast is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've got some more you can throw in.
Those are really good ones. Those are all really good suggestions. There's places like Bleeping Computer and certain blogs out there where they really summarize a lot of these incidents pretty well. Just staying up to date with the news is really important. Really, if you're specific to Jared's question, if you're looking for like a list of vulnerabilities, there's the MITRE CV database. These are common vulnerabilities that are detected, and they report it to this. They report it and they manage it in this database. That's usually whenever we're doing our assessments. That's basically what we use to compare these things to. We will look and see, okay, is there anything that matches one of these common vulnerabilities that are found? Maybe it's an outdated software or something else, and literally this list is growing every single day, and sometimes in such a fashion that it's almost hard to stay on top of. But really, you can look at those things, and CISA has weekly reports and of the major vulnerabilities that are pretty substantial. But really, like, unless it's basically a full-time job to look at these things. So really, like, having a good vulnerability management program in place, having something that can automatically detect these vulnerabilities and report on them, and then having cybersecurity experts like ourselves to be able to look at them and make a determination as to what you need to do about it is really the best thing to do as a continuous way to improve that.
Yeah, nothing will make you, as a business owner, want to hire a dedicated cybersecurity staff faster than going and reading one of those reports and try to make sense of what it means and what you can do about it. They're pretty detailed. They're pretty lengthy, and they're endless. They're absolutely endless.
That's true. Let's see what else we got here. What is the best first response to take once a ransomware attack has been identified? Good question. Really, one of the best things you can do is to decouple these systems from the network, potentially taking the entire network offline. But really, these are kind of things that are kind of reactionary, right? You're like, okay, something bad is happening. Let's just pull the plug on these things and figure out what to do next. Really, the best thing to do is, if you have cyber insurance, call first off, you need to have an incident response plan. I'm sorry. Yeah, so let's start off with that. So having an incident response plan is really going to define what you need to be doing in these incidents. So an incident response plan will have like a contact list, who to contact, who's responsible for what. Certainly, let's say that if you see a ransom note on your screen, it might be good to shut down the computer, call IT, call whoever is in charge, and have them contact cyber insurance right away. Getting cyber insurance activated in a ransomware incident is crucial if you have it. Having cyber insurance, if you were to, let's say, do something like maybe what was happening in this case, where the IT person that was there at the time didn't quite know what to do, so they just started wiping systems, thinking that they were getting rid of the virus, and started, kind of resetting things. But really, that's not going to do it. If you haven't closed up your gaps, they'll just get reinfected over and over. They call it an attack loop. So, these attack loops basically are like, hey, we're just going to keep hitting you because you've never quite fixed the problem, and we're just going to make it more painful every time. So, getting that cyber insurance activated, typically that'll include things like an incident response team and a cyber attorney. which will really kind of do that, help you do some of those forensics. You know, call up some cyber security professionals like ourselves. You know, we'll help consult and give you some direction. So hopefully you have an incident response plan, because that's really going to define what those steps are, though.
Yeah, and also it realize this, when you see the screen like you saw at the beginning of this presentation, you've been ransomware, it's probably too late. The attackers don't show themselves until they're sure that they've got you, until they're sure that they found your backups and secured those, until they're sure that they've owned you and they're going to wear you like a pair of pants. What you really want to focus on is prevention. Yeah,
That's 100% accurate. You're right. So the average time spent inside of these systems for some of these, so the average time what will happen is, like, you'll get it breached, and these hackers will live inside your system for upwards of over 200 days, and that's the average. So they'll actually have access to your systems. They're learning how your system works. They're figuring out how your backups work. They're maybe even like trying to get copies of your insurance policies, so they know exactly what to ask for. They're learning as much as they can about you, because until they reveal themselves, really they're able to just continuously do things and learn more about you, and potentially even be targeting you with phishing attacks and your customers with phishing attacks that are very, very targeted and very convincing, because now they know your ins and outs of your business. They might even know your invoices and everything, and so they know who owes you money, and they'll be hitting them up to give them fake invoices. Following these like cyber breaches, 25% of these businesses will file for bankruptcy after a cyber breach like this. It's pretty substantial. 10% of businesses go out of business completely. So just 1 in 10, if you get hit with ransomware, there's just a 1 in 10 chance that that's it. Your business is completely toast. Some of the more painful things besides those really are just losing your clients. You have clients exiting post breach, and then you have and healthcare has the largest impact of that. So healthcare has shown that they have the largest amount of clients that will leave post breach. And then also you have fewer clients willing to do business with you. There was a study that basically 25% of people are no longer really willing to do business with you after they've learned that you had a major breach. And like, this stuff happens more often than you think. A breach can lead to ransomware. Doesn't always, but breaches happen more commonly than people realize. In fact, there was a study done where 2/3 of all organizations had experienced a breach in the last 2 years. So there's a really good chance that even maybe your organization has been breached and you may not even know about it, or maybe it was just a minor breach, right? And it didn't really result in anything major, but it happens very often, and it can result in ransomware, and that's really where you kind of get into these worst case scenarios like this one. Let's see what other questions we got. Got a question about vulnerability. So they're asking if we have a specific platform to handle the initial vulnerability scans and information gathering.
it's top secret.
They have a lot of really good vulnerability scanners out there. There's, really one of the staples is a Nessus scan. It's a really great product to do that. But really, you could do a Nessus scan and you can find all the vulnerabilities, but really like having someone who can look at that and do an analysis on it and figure out, really where the ins and outs are. And then also coupling that with a penetration test will really yield you the most useful results. So like I can tell you, hey, look, you got a vulnerability on your Windows machine that's outdated. But what does that really mean to you? It's like, oh yeah, okay, so they can get admin access potentially with this vulnerability. But like, what does it all really mean? So a penetration test would show that, okay, we were able to get admin access through this vulnerability, and then that led to this attack, to this chain of events, where it's like, okay, they were able to get admin access, and then from there they were able to laterally move to other systems, and then compromise those other systems from this one vulnerability. And most of the time, it's like a domino effect. You get in through this one vulnerability, and then that leads to another compromise, and then so on and so forth. And then the more deeper you get into the systems, the easier it is to do those compromises. So doing a penetration test, you would see like, okay, this vulnerability actually led to a breach of our sensitive information. So that really tells you a lot of information. It's like, okay, well, we really need to take care of this vulnerability. It's not just simply like a thing on the paper that looks like it could be bad. Who knows what it does? You know, that really kind of gives you a real proof of concept, let's say. And these are really the best ways to handle that. And it needs to be a continuous thing where you're doing it all the time, you know, monthly at least, and really kind of continuously scanning. It's not something you just kind of scan once and then you're done with it. You know, new vulnerabilities pop up every day. Software that used to be secure yesterday is now suddenly insecure today. It happens that quickly, and unless you're looking at it all the time, it's, you know, just doing a one-time scan isn't enough a lot of times.
So we do have a question about how long it took to resolve the cybersecurity incident with the customer.
So even though we were able to get this customer up and running in 2 weeks, it was really almost a year-long endeavor to really clean up everything. You know, it took a really substantial number of hours. You know, we're talking like, you know, over 1,000 hours, I think, almost probably. It was quite a few hours. I don't know if it was quite that many, but it was quite a few hours. And so, you know, like our first couple of weeks, we were just there all the time. We had multiple people on site. And then, you know, once everything was kind of running again, and we were just kind of waiting on insurance to clean things up, you know, like things kind of tapered off. But meanwhile, you know, we've had to rebuild this customer from the ground up. So, you know, there was just lingering things. You know, we were trying to every single system was encrypted differently. So, you know, every server presented a new challenge. In fact, different drives on the same server were sometimes encrypted with different keys. So, you know, they were having to pay a separate ransom for every single different decryption key. So one server could have actually been several different decryptions. And then in some cases, the decryption key wouldn't work. And so they would have to pay for another decryption key to just hopefully that would work. And so they would have to do it again. And so, you know, this happened over a long period of time. It took probably a year really to get things pretty much squared away. You know, but even to this day, you know, now we're here several years later, and you know, there's still lingering effects from this ransomware attack. You know, every now and then it's like, hey, look, we need to look at some of this encrypted data and see if we have something that we're missing, you know, or maybe we're being asked for some kind of information and we think it's on one of these infected systems. So, you know, we took full image backups of the infected systems. And, you know, if ever needed, we're able to spin those up and decrypt it or look at it and see like what's there. And, you know, of course, we do that in a secure way. But it isn't just a long weekend. It's not even 2 weeks. It's a lingering thing. It almost lasts forever, really. It's something you don't really ever forget. So definitely not something to take lightly. I think we've answered most of the questions here, Drew. Thank you everyone for joining us. This was, you know, really great. Some really great questions. Thank you for all the good feedback. And hopefully you guys found something useful in this presentation. You know, we'll probably be doing more of these in the future, especially as, you know, things are trending in the news, or maybe there's something else we find would be useful for the community. But thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully see you again next time. Thank you, Drew.
Thanks, everyone.
Good job, guys.